There were nights when Michael Turner woke up feeling like he was falling, not from a great height, but from somewhere deep inside himself. And on the day everything began, the fall was worse. He opened his eyes before dawn and realized with the harsh clarity that only pain can deliver, that he could no longer remember the sound of Ellen's voice. 6 months after losing his wife, even his memories were beginning to slip away. And lying there, on the side of the bed that once belonged to her, Michael knew one thing. If he stayed in that house for 5 more minutes, there wouldn't be anything left of him worth saving. He got up without turning on the light, pulled on his boots out of instinct, the way someone flees from a burning building, and stepped out into the cold of the early autumn morning. The wind scraped at his skin, but he barely felt it. Ever since Ellen's death, the entire world seemed distant, like he was watching his own life through a fogged-up window. The small town of Granite Hollow, Montana was still fast asleep. Only the yellow street lamps lit the gravel road that led to Willow Creek Lake, a place that had always meant peace to him, and that now drew him in like a final refuge before everything collapsed. Michael walked quickly, driven by an impulse he didn't understand. He had woken up with a heavy, unsettling feeling, almost a warning. In his dream, Ellen had held his hand and said, with an odd and steady certainty, "Don't let time swallow you." He repeated the sentence to himself as he crossed the woods. That was exactly what was happening. Time was swallowing him whole, devouring his memories, his courage, his sense of self. When he reached the lake, he found someone he didn't expect. Oliver Hayes, his neighbor, and the only friend who still insisted on checking if he was alive. Oliver was sitting on a fallen log, staring at the dark water as if speaking to ghosts. At 72, he seemed made of stubbornness and memories too heavy to carry alone. "You don't usually show up this early," Oliver murmured, without taking his eyes off the lake. "I couldn't stay at home today," Michael replied. Oliver didn't ask why. Between men their age, direct questions were seen as intrusions. Pain, though obvious, was met with quiet respect. For a few minutes, they listened only to the sound of the wind rustling the leaves. Michael took a deep breath. That bad feeling was still there, like something was watching him from inside the cold morning. "Have you ever—" he began, hesitating. "Ever what?" Oliver turned slowly. Michael swallowed hard. Felt like something was about to happen, like the air warned you before anything else did. Oliver narrowed his eyes, thinking, "Every time I felt that way, I was right." Michael didn't know what to say. He just let the words settle inside him. That's when he heard the first snap. Sharp, sudden, coming from the woods behind them. They both turned. A second snap. Closer. "Deer?" Oliver guessed. Michael didn't answer. The tension crawled across his skin like electricity. Another snap, this time followed by a sound that froze his blood. A human groan. Michael stepped forward instinctively. "Wait," Oliver said, grabbing his arm. "It might be someone hurt, or it might be something worse." Michael gently pulled his arm free, but he didn't back away. "I'm not leaving until I see." He stepped between the trees, driven by something stronger than fear, maybe guilt, maybe the need to do something that wasn't about his own pain. Oliver followed, despite his bad knee. The forest floor was damp, smelling of earth and fresh leaves. The groan sounded again, weaker. Michael quickened his pace. When he reached the clearing, he froze. A man lay collapsed at the base of a tree. Dark jeans, a green jacket, boots covered in dirt. His face was bruised, a streak of dried blood on his temple. Beside him, an open backpack spilled a few belongings: a canteen, a small notebook, several loose papers, and something that made Michael's stomach tighten: a yellowed envelope with his name written on it. Michael Turner. Oliver arrived right behind him. "Good Lord," he murmured. "Do you know this man?" Michael couldn't answer. That handwriting, that envelope, that strange presence in the woods, as if it had come here for him. The wind blew, making the envelope tremble in the grass. Michael knelt slowly, feeling his knees shake. He reached out, then stopped before touching it. "This doesn't make any sense," he said, more to himself than to Oliver. "Maybe it does," Oliver replied, his tone serious, "but you won't know until you open it." Michael picked up the envelope. The paper was cold, slightly damp. For a moment, he felt the same vertigo he had felt when the hospital called months earlier, like an invisible door was opening, ready to swallow his life all over again. He took a steady breath, opened it, and in that instant, he knew his life had just changed forever, though he still didn't know whether it was the beginning of healing or the start of an even deeper loss.
The paper inside the envelope trembled in Michael Turner's hands, even though the wind had stopped. It was an inner tremor, coming from a place he'd avoided facing since Ellen died. Oliver watched him in silence, carrying the heavy calm of someone who had seen life turn upside down far too late. Michael unrolled the paper slowly, the way someone disarms a bomb. And when he finally opened it, he didn't find a long letter, an explanation, or anything remotely comforting. There was only one sentence, written in a steady, old-fashioned hand that felt almost familiar. "You're not as alone as you think." He read it 3 times, then 4, and 5. The words struck his chest like a slow, deliberate blade. Standing there, in the middle of a cold clearing deep in Montana, the loneliness he'd been managing like a numbing medication started to slip. "Is this some kind of joke?" Oliver asked, stepping closer. "I don't know," Michael replied, his voice rough. They both looked at the unconscious man. He was breathing, but pale, battered, fragile, his face smeared with dirt and dried blood. Young enough to be someone's son. 30, maybe a little older. "We need to get him to someone who can help," Oliver said. Michael nodded, though he kept staring at the note as if it might rewrite itself. Something inside him was shifting, a deep restlessness connected to something he couldn't name. Carrying the stranger back to the truck wasn't easy. He was heavy, the path uneven, and Oliver limped. But they managed to get him into the back seat of Michael's pickup. As he drove toward town, Michael couldn't stop glancing at the rearview mirror. The stranger moved occasionally, letting out low groans, but never woke. "You should have left the envelope back there," Oliver said, breaking the silence. "I wasn't leaving without it," Michael answered. "Maybe you shouldn't have opened it." "Maybe." It was strange. He wasn't afraid. He felt involved. For the first time in months, something demanded his attention, not because he had no choice, but because it felt like it was meant to. When they reached Granite Hollow's urgent care clinic, the nurses rushed the man inside. Michael and Oliver waited in the hallways, surrounded by the constant hum of air conditioning units and the sharp smell of disinfectant that seemed to swallow everything. Michael kept the note pressed tight in his pocket, as if it might vanish without enough pressure. "Should we call the sheriff?" Oliver asked. "Not yet," Michael replied. "First I want to know who he is." "You think this has something to do with—" Oliver didn't finish the sentence. "With Ellen. With the pain. With the emptiness." Michael didn't know. and he hated not knowing. 40 minutes later, a doctor approached. She's stable, exhausted, dehydrated, likely passed out after a nasty fall. He injured his temple, but it doesn't look serious. When he wakes up, we'll need someone to answer a few questions. Did he say anything? Michael asked. Just a name, she replied. Daniel. The name hung in the air, heavy. Michael frowned. Just Daniel? Yes, no last name. Oliver and Michael exchanged a look. The stranger was a complete mystery. Can I see him? Michael asked. The doctor hesitated, then gave a small nod. Only for a few minutes. He's still sedated. Michael stepped into the room slowly. The walls were an opaque white, the kind that never makes anyone feel better. Daniel lay connected to an IV, his breathing slow, hair stuck to his forehead. He looked far too vulnerable for someone carrying such a pointed message. Michael approached and watched him. Nothing made sense. Nothing. He ran a hand over his face. For months, his life had been a sequence of empty days, each one identical to the last. Now suddenly there was a man in the woods with an envelope bearing his name. A sentence written as if designed to pull him out of grief by force. Why? By whom? Michael sat down beside the bed. Who are you, and why do you know my name? Daniel didn't answer. He only breathed deeply, as if trapped in a bad dream. The door opened. It was Rachel, Michael's daughter. At 32, she carried the same steadiness her mother had, and the same difficulty hiding when she was worried. Dad, please, tell me what's going on. She had found out through Oliver, who texted her while Michael was at the clinic. She'd come right away. Michael sighed. I just found him, he explained, too drained for embellishments. And there was this. He showed her the note. Rachel read it, then lifted her eyes, an expression caught between frustration and fear. This sounds dangerous, or important, or ridiculous, or all of that at the same time. Rachel crossed her arms, exasperated. Dad, you're barely managing Mom's loss. This, she pointed at Daniel, could be someone trying to drag you into trouble. Michael stood slowly, tired of being treated like fragile glass. What if it's not? He asked. What if it's something I need to face? Rachel took a long breath. You never talk like this. What's different now? Michael hesitated. He looked at Daniel, then at the note, and admitted, when I woke up this morning, I realized I was forgetting the sound of your mother's voice. Rachel stared at him, and something inside her softened. Fear shifted into understanding. Dad, I need something that pulls me back, Rachel. Anything. He glanced at Daniel. Maybe this is exactly that. Rachel didn't like it, but she understood, and she stayed close. Hours later, almost at dusk, Daniel finally opened his eyes. Michael was by the bed when he murmured, You're Michael Turner? A chill shot down Michael's spine. I am. How do you know my name? Daniel drew a painful breath. His eyes widened, fear and urgency blended into one, and he said something that made every hair on Michael's arm stand on end. Because your wife asked me to find you. Michael's world collapsed in a silent crash, and nothing at all, would ever be the same again.
Winter had started surrendering to itself, giving way to a gentler air, when John woke before dawn. He couldn't explain why. He just felt something inside urging him to get up, as if an old, quiet voice had finally gathered enough courage to speak. In the living room, the red-tailed hawk watched him with calm attention, now fully healed.
Its feathers glowed under the faint light drifting in through the window. The bird had become a mirror, strong, alive, ready, and waiting for a decision that wasn't its own. John opened the back door. A cold breeze slipped in, carrying the scent of damp earth, a sign that winter was losing the fight. The hawk lifted its head, and John understood. "It's time, isn't it?" he whispered, a farewell and a rebirth woven into the same breath. He walked out to the field behind the house, the same place where months earlier he had found the bird motionless, broken, almost without hope. Now the scene was different. The sky was turning orange, and the new season was beginning to show its first signs of life. Holding the hawk close to his chest, John felt his heartbeat match the bird's. Not rushed, not anxious, just steady. And right then, he realized something he'd never put into words. He wasn't just releasing the hawk. He was releasing an old version of himself. The version that relied on his wife to exist. The version that believed his worth came from what he held together, not from who he was. The version that carried guilt for not having been good enough to prevent the end. He raised his arms. The hawk spread its wings, long, strong, built to fly far. And then it soared. The sound of its wings cutting through the air was so sharp it tightened John's throat. It wasn't sadness, it was gratitude. Gratitude for holding on, for caring, and finally, for allowing life to take its natural path. For the first time since the separation, he felt peace. Later, sitting on the deck with a mug of hot coffee in his hands, John realized the silence no longer frightened him. It was a lived-in silence, filled with memories, yes, but now also filled with possibilities. Emily arrived soon after, carrying 2 fresh donuts from the local bakery. She sat beside him, without hurry, without guilt, without the weight of unsaid things. "You seem different, Dad." "I am, but I don't think it's different, it's just me. I like this version." They laughed, a light, unexpected laugh, impossible months earlier. And John let a sentence slip, one that surprised even him. "I want to live again, Emily. Not survive. Live." She smiled, and in that smile there was forgiveness, reconciliation, and a future. The sun climbed slowly, lighting the house, the field, and the man who was finally remembering how to breathe. Because in the end, John had discovered a truth many people spend a lifetime ignoring. Delays aren't punishments. They're invitations to rebuild. Loss doesn't close paths, it reveals new ones. And the right time never arrives for those who force fate, but it always comes to those who learn to prepare their own hearts. And when John looked up at the sky and saw the hawk flying high, he understood it wasn't just freedom, it was a reminder. Sometimes life only returns what you love when you finally learn to let go.